Welcome to the deep dive. You've likely seen the headlines about tariffs swirling around, but let's cut through the noise a bit. We want to get straight to what it means for, well, the lifeblood of our economy, small businesses. How are these tariffs actually impacting them, day to day?
Exactly. Today we're digging into that impact, drawing on observations from Chris Lehnes, who's a factoring specialist. Now, for those who might not know, factoring is basically a service where businesses sell their invoices, their accounts receivable, for cash upfront.
Right.
So this gives Chris a really interesting viewpoint, kind of a real-time window into the financial pressures and the operational shifts these businesses are facing because of tariff-related price increases.
Right. So our mission here is to pull out the key strategies, maybe some surprising ways small businesses are adapting to this whole tariff landscape. We want to give you a clear picture of this, well, pretty significant economic issue and hopefully maybe a few aha moments along the way. Okay, so what's the first thing Chris Lehnes is seeing? What's the initial reaction from these small businesses?
Well, what's really clear is that small businesses aren't just, passively taking these hits. They're not just absorbing the costs. They're actively trying to get ahead of the curve. Lehnes really emphasizes this proactive stance. He notes that just the introduction or even the threat of tariffs can seriously disrupt their operations and, crucially, their financial planning.
Disruptive, yeah, I can imagine. So what's the first, concrete action they're taking?
A key tactic, Lehnes points out, is something called front-loading.
Front-loading?
Yeah. It's essentially when a small business buys a huge amount of inventory before the tariffs actually take effect. The idea is simple. Secure the goods at the lower pre-tariff price.
Ah.
And we're seeing this across different sectors. Think electronics retailers stocking up on components or textile companies buying more fabric than usual.
That makes immediate sense by now before the price jumps. But, sounds like it could bring its own set of headaches, too.
Precisely. Yeah, that's the catch. While it seems straightforward, front-loading really hinges on being able to predict demand accurately. Businesses with maybe better data analytics might find it less of a gamble. Others relying more on gut feeling. It's tougher.
Right.
And beyond that, suddenly need more storage space, right? That costs money. Plus, you're tying up a significant amount of capital up front, which could really squeeze cash flow. And then there's always the risk, the big one, that demand changes. You get left holding inventory you can't sell.
So it's definitely a bit of a high-stakes game they're playing there. Okay, so besides just loading up on goods, what other strategies are small businesses using to, navigate these tariffs?
Well, faced with those risks of holding too much inventory, many are looking at something more fundamental. They're looking at diversifying their supply chains.
Diversifying. Okay, how so?
Businesses that maybe historically relied really heavily on just one country. China often comes up because of its manufacturing dominance. They're now actively looking for alternative suppliers elsewhere.
And where are they looking? Any specific regions?
Lehnes mentions places like Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, for example. Mexico is another increasingly attractive option. And interestingly, we're even seeing some businesses giving domestic suppliers, here in the U.S., a fresh look.
Ah, domestic.
Yeah, the main goal is to reduce their exposure. Less reliance on goods directly hit by tariffs, and also building a more resilient supply network overall, kind of hedging against geopolitical risks, too.
Again, sounds logical on paper, but surely shifting your entire supply chain, that can't be quick or easy, especially for a small business.
You're absolutely right. It's a huge undertaking. It's not just finding a new factory. You've got to navigate totally different regulations, set up new quality control, build trust with new partners. It's a steep learning curve and potentially quite expensive initially.
Yeah, that trust piece is huge. So diversification offers maybe long-term stability, but definite short-term hurdles. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's talk about the unavoidable bit. When their costs do go up because of tariffs, how are small businesses handling passing those price increases onto their customers?
Right, and this is where Lehnes really stresses the importance of strategic communication. It's not just about slapping on a higher price tag. It's about how you explain it, how you justify those increases to your customer base.
Okay, so what does that strategic communication actually look like? What are they doing?
Well, we're seeing businesses be pretty transparent about it, explaining something like, due to increased costs resulting from tariffs on imported materials.
So being upfront.
Exactly. Framing it in a way that acknowledges these external pressures they can't control. Some are also trying to soften the blow a bit, maybe through tactics like bundling products together or offering loyalty programs to kind of reward those repeat customers.
Nice.
The main goal is to keep those customer relationships intact while still covering their rising costs.
Smart. Yeah, nobody likes feeling like prices are just going up for no reason. Now, you mentioned earlier a renewed interest in domestic suppliers. Is this just a fleeting thought, or are tariffs actually pushing some businesses toward, bringing manufacturing back home, reshoring?
Lehnes indicates that yes, these tariff pressures are genuinely causing some small manufacturers, in particular, to seriously reevaluate reshoring. They're taking a hard look at whether bringing production back to the U.S. is feasible now. The initial investment, yeah, it can be substantial, but they're weighing the long-term picture.
And what are those potential long-term benefits that might tip the scales towards reshoring now?
Well, think about having much greater control over your whole supply chain. That's a big one. Potentially lower transportation costs and shorter lead times, too. And then there's the branding aspect, right? That Made in USA label can really resonate with a lot of consumers. So for some businesses, tariffs are kind of shifting that whole cost-benefit analysis, making domestic production look more attractive than it did before.
It's fascinating how these external pressures can force such fundamental rethinking of how businesses operate. Are we also seeing small businesses looking inwards, trying to find savings internally?
Oh, absolutely. Lehnes observes that this sort of tariff anxiety, this background hum of uncertainty, is prompting a really deep dive into internal efficiencies. Businesses are scrutinizing pretty much every aspect of their operations, looking for any potential cost savings.
So it's not just worry, it's driving action.
Right. It's this palpable uncertainty that's impacting investment decisions, planning. It leads to a much more critical eye on every single expense.
What kind of efficiency measures are we talking about? What are they actually doing?
We're seeing things like increased adoption of automation, even simple automation for repetitive tasks. Businesses are actively renegotiating contracts, not just for tariffed goods, but with all their suppliers and service providers, optimizing logistics, finding smarter shipping routes, even exploring things like shared warehousing with other businesses to split overhead costs.
Wow, okay.
It's really about becoming as lean and efficient as they possibly can.
Sounds like they're really tightening their belts where they can. Now, beyond these individual company actions, tweaking operations, finding efficiencies, are small businesses also trying to influence the bigger picture, the policy landscape?
Yes, and Lehnes points this out as a really crucial development. There's a noticeable uptick in lobbying and collective action among small business owners. They're getting much more engaged with trade associations, regional business groups, their local chambers of commerce.
Interesting. What's driving that increased political engagement? What are they hoping to achieve?
Well, the primary goal is pretty straightforward. They're advocating for tariff relief. They might be seeking specific exemptions for certain essential goods or pushing for government assistance programs to help them cope with these added costs and complexities.
So making their voices heard.
Exactly. There's a growing understanding, it seems, that influencing policy is now pretty essential for their survival and, their ability to grow.
Okay, so if we step back and try to summarize Chris Lehnes's insights here, what's the overall picture of how tariffs are hitting small businesses?
I think the key takeaway is that while tariffs definitely create significant challenges, nobody's denying that they're also acting as this powerful catalyst, a catalyst for adaptation, for innovation within the small business sector.
Yeah.
We're seeing these proactive strategies like securing supplies early. We're seeing a fundamental rethinking of supply chains, that diversification push, careful recalibration of pricing with strategic communication, and this really strong drive towards operational efficiency.
And looking ahead, if these trends continue, what might the future hold based on what Lehnes is seeing?
He actually concludes on a perhaps somewhat optimistic note. He suggests that if these adaptive behaviors stick, if they persist, the long-term result could actually be a more resilient, maybe even more competitive small business ecosystem. One that's better prepared to handle the bumps and uncertainties of global trade in the future.
So it sounds like while tariffs are undeniably a major pressure point, they're also forcing small businesses to become incredibly resourceful, strategic even.
Precisely. They're showing remarkable adaptability, really smart strategic thinking in how they're responding. It really underlines their critical role in the economy and also just how agile they can be when they need to.
So let's leave our listeners with something to think about. Considering all these rapid adaptations we've just discussed, from these big shifts in supply chains to maybe even a comeback for domestic manufacturing, how might the actual landscape of goods and services available to you as a consumer evolve in the coming years because of all this? what new things might become important for you to think about when you're making your own purchasing decisions. Definitely food for thought. Thanks for this really insightful deep dive today.